Hello and welcome, everybody. Thank you very much for tuning in. I am Lucas Tietzen, and this is Blues News Media. Now, if you've been following us for any length of time, you know that we are currently in the process of going over each and every part of this paper produced by the Rockefeller Foundation, Scenarios for the Future of Technology and International Development. This paper made really big headlines earlier this year, at least within the conspiracy theory truther community, because of the first part of the paper, Lockstep, which predicted a pandemic that would sweep the world along with strict authoritarian control, lockdowns, and massive civil unrest following that. Seems pretty spot on. That's 2020 in a nutshell. Then we went over the second part of this paper, called Clever Together, where it made eerie predictions. What used to be in the realm of conspiracy theory is now plain as day talked about by the Rockefeller Foundation. And that is saying that we needed a strong central control power grid that would be responsible for basically every aspect of life, from how much you consume, food, water, energy, where you could go, when you could go there. It's no longer fantasy land. It is talked about as necessary by the Rockefeller Foundation. Keeping in mind, this was written all the way back in 2010. 10 years ago, this was discussed by them. And now everything seems to be slotting into place, which I find rather interesting. But the great thing about this is that there's more. There's more to the story here. There's more to discuss, because now we're going to be going over the third part of this paper, and that is called Hack Attack. And in my opinion, Lockstep was scary. Clever Together was horrifying once you really thought about it. But this one paints an all too, bleak future, and it is horrifying, and you can see the writing on the wall. Again, this was written back in 2010. You can see it playing out very easily today. But that is why we need to read it, we need to discuss it, we need to share it, which is why we always include everything we read in the show notes below. Please, after watching this, pull it up yourself, print it out, hand it to your friends and family, share it on social media, look into the articles and share those. Whatever it is that you can do to spread this information, do it. And as you're doing that, please, if you could, like, share, subscribe this video on all of the platforms wherever you may be watching it. But without further ado, let's get right into it. Hack Attack. An economically unstable and shock-prone world in which governments weaken, criminals thrive, and dangerous innovations emerge. It opens with devastating shocks like September 11, the Southeast Asian tsunami of 2004, and the 2010 Haiti earthquake had certainly primed the world for sudden disasters. But no one was prepared for a world in which large-scale catastrophes would occur with such breathtaking frequency. The year 2010 to 2020 were dubbed the Doom Decade. For good reason. The 2012 Olympic bombing, which killed 13,000, was followed closely by an earthquake in Indonesia killing 400,000, a tsunami that almost wiped out Nicaragua, and the onset of the West China famine, caused by a once-in-a-millennium drought linked to climate change. Which is crazy because I didn't include this here right now, but China is currently going through a food crisis, soon to be coming to a town near you. But right there, it's crazy how they were just able to predict these things. But it continues with, not surprisingly, this opening series of deadly asynchronous catastrophes, there were more, put enormous pressure on an already overstressed global economy that has entered the decade still in recession. Massive humanitarian efforts cost vast sums of money, but the primary sources, from aid agencies to developed world governments, had run out of funds to offer. Most nations could no longer afford their locked-in costs, let alone respond to increased citizen demand for more security, more healthcare coverage, more social programs and services, and other infrastructure repair. In 2014, when mudslides in Lima buried thousands, only minimal help trickled in, prompting the Economist headline, "Is the planet finally bankrupt?" Which is funny because everybody's in debt. You say that word, you don't really think about it. The United States is 26 something trillion dollars in debt. Truly an incomparable amount of money. Then you look here. This was back in the middle of July. Global debt hit record of 331% of GDP in the first quarter. That is a tremendous amount of money. But we're just going to read a little bit of this here, and we just got to think, who do people owe all this money to exactly? But this article from NASDAQ.com opens with, global debt surged to a record $258 trillion in the first quarter of 2020 as economies around the world shut down to contain the coronavirus, and debt levels are continuing to rise, the Institute for International Finance said on Thursday in a report. The IIF, which represents global banks and financial institutions, said the first quarter debt to GDP ratio jumped by over 10 percentage points, the largest quarterly surge on record, to reach a record 331%. While the rise in debt levels was well below average quarterly gains seen from 2015 to 2019, the pace of global debt buildup by governments, companies, financial institutions, and households has accelerated since March, it said. Overall, gross debt issuance hit an eye-watering record of $12.5 trillion in the second quarter, compared with a quarterly average of $5.5 trillion in 2019, the IIF said. It noted that 60% of the issues came from governments. Well, you don't say. I like how it says it came from governments, but it's really the governments signing on to a massive amount of debt in the taxpayer's name, which the governments never really intend to pay off. So I think we need to reword that sentence there. But there you go. I mean, the debt is skyrocketing. People are being burdened by it. Just like the Rockefeller Foundation kind of knew it would. But the paper continues, these dire circumstances forced tough trade-offs. In 2015, the U.S. reallocated a large share of its defense spending to domestic concerns, pulling out of Afghanistan, which big boy Papa Trump has already said that he is doing. This is from CNN. Trump administration finalizing plan to withdraw 4,000 troops from Afghanistan. This is 2020. This paper was written back in 2010. Now, in my opinion, I'll believe it when I fully see it, when I see all these people leave. But 2010, though, they pay lip service to saying we got to get out of there. I mean, this paper was written in the onset of the Obama era. And though he talked about it, yippity yap, it never really got done. And now it is. Just when a pandemic's hitting, the economy is tanking, debt is rising. It's crazy how they were able to kind of predict all these things. But it continues with, where the resurgent Taliban seized power once again. In Europe, Asia, South America, and Africa, more and more nation states lost control of their public finances, along with the capacity to help their citizens and retain stability and order. Resource scarcities and trade disputes, together with severe economic and climate stresses, pushed many alliances and partnerships to the breaking point. They also sparked proxy wars and low-level conflict in resource-rich parts of the developing world. nations raise trade barriers in order to protect their domestic sectors against imports and in the face of global food and resource shortages to reduce exports of agricultural produce and commodities. Now, real quick, that's a lot packed in that sentence, and a lot of it may seem business as usual. That's how the world works. But we have definitely seen this. If any of you pay attention or remember, Bolivia suffered a coup where the president was, I don't know what you call it, disposed or ousted. He was removed from power. And people were pointing at Elon Musk, who was going to gain handsomely from this coup, had a hand in it. And this is from Mint Press News. This will, again, be included in the show notes for you to go read in its entirety. But the article is called United Tesla Company, Widespread Condemnation of Elon Musk's Bolivia Coup Comments, which are incredible. But we'll just read a little bit of it here. The article opens with multi-billionaire Tesla Motors CEO Elon Musk once again proved that he does not know how to keep silent. After being challenged on Twitter about his alleged involvement in the overthrow of the democratically elected government of Evo Morales in Bolivia, if I'm pronouncing that right, last November, Musk responded, "We will coup whoever we want. Deal with it." And I mean, that basically says it all. If that is not the American mindset of the elite in its entirety, I really don't know what is. But I know this came about because a lot of people are saying that he stand to gain control of the country's lithium reserves. So, it would make sense. Resource scarcity sparks wars. It sparks these proxy wars. And naturally, the resources get kicked on over to the mega billionaire companies that will then, sell it back to the people at an enormous profit as we suffer economically and suffer, as this paper here says, global food and resource shortages. Now, where have I heard that? Certainly China is already suffering, but who else was going to be withholding their food? Oh, that's right. Russia halts wheat exports, deepening fears of global food shortages. And I'll have you go ahead and read this for yourselves, but there is a food shortage on the way. One that modern day society has truly never seen, at least in the Western world. China is lacking food. Russia's going to be holding on so it can have a stockpile. There was huge swaths of corn that were destroyed in a mega storm that just hit Iowa. I feel like people aren't really realizing how detrimental this is going to be until they go to the grocery store and they can't afford to feed their families. This is going to get real. Start growing food now if you can. Start squirreling some away if you can. Things will get dire. You're not going to just wake up and this is all going to disappear. You need to prepare. But it's just crazy. Once again, 2010 and the Rockefeller Foundation just knew that this was coming. And they continue with, by 2016, the global coordination and interconnectedness that had marked the post-Berlin Wall was tenuous at best. With government power weakened, order rapidly disintegrating, and safety nets evaporating, violence and crime grew more rampant. Countries with ethnic, religious, or class divisions saw especially sharp spikes in hostility. I don't know how to pronounce that. Separatists dramatically expanded their guerrilla campaign in East India. Israeli-Palestinian bloodshed escalated. Who would have thought? And across Africa, fights over resources erupted along ethnic or tribal lines. Meanwhile, overtaxed militaries and police forces could do little to stop growing communities of criminal and terrorists from gaining power. Technology-enabled gangs and networked criminal enterprises exploited both the weakness of state and the desperation of individuals. With increasing ease, these global guerrillas moved illicit products through underground channels from poor producer countries to markets in the developed world. Using retired 727s and other rogue aircraft, they crisscrossed the Atlantic from South America to Africa, transporting cocaine, weapons, and operatives. Drug and gun money became a common recruiting tool for the desperately poor. If that's just not an incredible statement, I do not know what is. It continues with, though, criminal networks also grew highly skilled at counterfeiting illicit goods through reverse engineering. Many of these rip-offs and copycats were of poor quality or downright dangerous. In the context of weak health systems, corruption, and inattention to standards, either within countries or global bodies like the World Health Organization, tainted vaccines entered the public health systems of several African countries. In 2021, 600 children in the Côte d'Ivoire died from a bogus hepatitis B vaccine, which paled in comparison to the scandal sparked by mass deaths from a tainted anti-malarial drug years later. The deaths and resulting scandals sharply affected public confidence in vaccine delivery. Now, before we continue, I do want to make this point. As many people know, there is a lot of controversy around the COVID-19 vaccine and whether or not people will want to take it or will it be mandatory and everything like that. But the fact that this is in this paper and they are blaming global guerrillas, organized crime, that's the problem. They're the ones manufacturing these and selling it to the general public because the governments are failing to fill that void. This just creates the perfect opportunity for governments, pharmaceutical corporations, that if there is any death, if there is some sort of, mishap in the administering of these drugs, they can easily just say, oh, it's those criminals over there. They're not skilled like we are. They're making bogus snake oil that they're giving to people that are becoming incredibly damaged by it. Even though we know right now things like vaccines, the COVID-19 vaccine that they're working on now, is detrimental to your health. But luckily, even back in 2010, they have already laid down the scapegoat. Just in case things do go wrong, they can point the finger at somebody. And yeah, it's not going to be themselves. They already have an out, the safety switch. It's already baked into the cake that not if, but when people start either dropping dead or being horribly maimed by these drugs, they already know who to put in the paper to blame. And you got to keep that in mind as this agenda rolls out. I just thought that needed a little bit more attention. They've already have a backup plan when their drug goes south on the general population. So we'll continue. And it goes on to say, parents, not just in Africa, but elsewhere, began to avoid vaccinating their children. And it wasn't long before infant and child mortality rates rose to levels not seen since 1970s. Naturally, it's because you're not coming to take your vaccine. That's why that's why your kids are dying. I'm sure it has nothing to do with the horrible crap that you're feeding them or the, poor state of water or the air, all these other things that could deal with child mortality. I'm sure it's all because people aren't marching their kids out, rolling up their sleeves and having them injected with God knows what, especially what in the future, who knows what is to come. But even with the COVID-19 scare, we've already seen this playing out. From fastcompany.com, they have an article that is titled 16% of parents haven't vaccinated their kids due to COVID-19. And the article opens with, in a hidden consequence of the coronavirus pandemic that public health experts find alarming, 16% of parents say their children haven't received all the vaccinations recommended by their pediatricians because COVID-19 has made scheduling inconvenient or impossible. I'd say it's a little bit of a bright side. The findings from a national Harris poll conducted exclusively for Fast Company suggest that yet another public health crisis could be running parallel to the pandemic. The rate of parents delaying vaccination for pandemic-related reasons tips a little higher for male respondents than female ones, 19 versus 11%. All these percentages are likely low as the difference between what people say and what they actually do is often stark. Before the outbreak, 64% of parents said their children got all or most of their vaccines on schedule, and another 17% said the same thing, but not always on schedule, according to the Harris poll. So I'll link this up in the show notes for you to see, but you can already tell, that trend's already happening, and you know that they're going to go right ahead and blame these parents for, any deaths. And I guarantee you, as the craziness, as the madness continues to go on, these parents will be demonized. And I'm sure they'll be threatened with having their child taken away because you are not competent enough to raise your own child. You never were. The state just allowed you to look after them. It continues, though. Technology hackers were also hard at work. Internet scams and pyramid schemes plagued inboxes. Meanwhile, more sophisticated hackers attempted to take down corporations, government systems, and banks via phishing scams and database information heists. At their many successes, generated billions of dollars in losses. Desperate to protect themselves and their intellectual property, the few multinationals still thriving enacted strong, increasingly complex defensive measures. Patent applications skyrocketed, and patent thickets proliferated as companies fought to claim and control even the tiniest innovations. Security measures and screenings tightened. This Wild West environment had a profound impact on innovation. The threat of being hacked and the presence of so many thefts and fakes lowered the incentives to create me first rather than me too technologies. And so many patent thickets made the cross-pollination of ideas and research difficult at best. Blockbuster pharmaceuticals quickly became artifacts of the past, replaced by increased production of generics. Breakthrough innovations still happened in various industries, but they were focused more on technologies that could not be easily replicated or re-engineered. And once created, they were vigorously guarded by their inventors, or even by their nations. In 2022, a biofuel breakthrough in Brazil was protected as a national treasure and used as a bargaining chip in trade with other countries. Verifying the authenticity of anything was increasingly difficult. The heroic efforts of several companies and NGOs to create recognized seals of safety and approval proved ineffective when those seals were hacked. The most positive effects of the mobile and internet revolutions were tempered by their increasing fragility as scamming and viruses proliferated, preventing these networks from achieving the reliability required to become the backbone of developing economies, or a source of trustworthy information for anybody. Pardon me. Interestingly, not all of the hacking was bad. Genetically modified crops and do-it-yourself biotech became backyard and garage activities, producing important advances. In 2017, a network of renegade African scientists who returned to their home countries after working in Western multinationals unveiled the first of a range of new NGOs. What am I saying? I'm sorry. GMOs that boosted agricultural productivity on the continent. I wonder what NGOs are. But that's really great. As the food supply starts to crumble, no doubt organic food, natural food is going to be demonized. Thank goodness we can always fall back on those beautiful genetically modified organism crops that have been proven to be detrimental to your health, because more often than not they are sprayed with a cocktail of chemicals that cause a health wide range of health issues. So at least you'll be able to eat something. It just might make you sicker than a dog. Goes on to say, but despite such efforts, the global have/have not gap grew wider than ever. This is where it gets kind of really creepy, in my opinion. The very rich still had the financial means to protect themselves. Gated communities sprung up from New York to Lagos, providing safe havens surrounded by slums. In 2025, it was de rigueur, I can't pronounce that, to build not a house, but a high-walled fortress guarded by armed personnel. The wealthy also capitalize on loose regulatory environment to experiment with advanced medical treatments and other under-the-radar activities. I just want to make sure that really gets through people's heads right now. The Rockefeller Foundation has been pretty good at predicting a lot of these things that have either come to pass or you can easily see happening. And unfortunately, I think this falls under the latter. You can easily see this happen. We're not going to use that term, looking up or looking down in their ivory towers. It's going to be very literal. They're literally going to have a high-walled fortress looking down on the slums, the great unwashed, the masses, the extra mouths to feed, the mouth breathers. This is all laid out for you back in 2010. That is scary, especially when you have hyperinflation about to hit probably sometime next year with the trillions of dollars. The Federal Reserve thought it would be smart to just print up and there would be no consequences and everything's happy-go-lucky fun time while food shortages are on the rise. This is scary. This is right around the corner. I can't stress that enough if people don't really, really understand what is going to come either by the end of this year or going into next year. 2019 is going to seem like a beautiful garden as we march our way into the hellish landscape of the future. And even as they sit in their ivory towers, these haves, the global rich, they are going to be experimenting for fun, under the radar activities with advanced medical treatments, which we know that they are trying to achieve immortality, whether that be through, medical practices or through the uploading of the consciousness. This is horrifying. These people, they suffer a crazy delusion that they are literally better than you. Literally, genetically, they are superior to each and every person watching this video. I doubt one of them are watching right now. So that's why I say everybody, 99.99% of the population is just dead weight to them. They don't matter. They don't count. They don't deserve to have the finer things in life. those people do. These crazed eugenics bastards do. And they are so ingrained in this ideology that they can't leave this world. They are literally working towards immortality, of being these superhuman beings. It's not crazy. It's not science fiction. It is, unfortunately, the future. Maybe we should do an episode on how they are actively right now trying to achieve immortality. Because it's scary. These people are... Nobody likes death. Nobody wants to die. But these people are horrified of it. They want to cling to these bodies as long as they can. And for some reason cause as much damage while they are here. Just... This whole part of the paper, if anything, this one little paragraph, this is the one to pay attention to. It was admitted back in 2010. But we'll finish out this part of the paper quick. Those who couldn't buy their way out of chaos, which was most people, me and you, retreated to whatever safety they could find.